Hi everyone and welcome to Anxiety Remedies. Today we're going to talk about the vicious anxious cycle. Now the anxiety cycle, it also called the avoidance cycle, is something I know pretty well with my health anxiety. It also occurs with people suffering from depression as well. But today I'm going to talk mainly about the anxiety cycle and how we can get out of that and break that cycle. It isn't just one thing that happens for a lot of us. So for me with my health anxiety, I'll feel anxious about multiple and various different things, whether that's just solely to do with my health and that fear of dying essentially, or it can be in a social situation or at work as well. And so really one of the key things is to identify, okay, what's my trigger? What is making me anxious at this point? So on my journey, I've learned to really try and recognize what's triggering me in that scenario. And at the moment, that's great. I do know usually what is triggering me. And I recognize my symptoms of anxiety. Like I said on my previous videos, different people have different symptoms of anxiety, and sometimes these can change as well. So sometimes you'll feel anxious one way and then you'll feel different again the next time. It's consistent with what I'm anxious about. So if I'm anxious about choking, then I can feel it in my throat. If I'm anxious about my vertigo, then I'll start to feel off balance, those kinds of things. And I know that this is caused by my anxiety now. I've had physical checks, probably too many physical checks with the doctors and with GPs, and I've gone through private healthcare as well as the NHS, so I know that there's nothing physically wrong with me, even though sometimes I think, oh, maybe they missed something, and I'm sure that is also something you might think as well. But actually most of the time I know that it will just be my anxiety. The anxiety cycle is identifying what you're anxious about. So you'll get anxious about something. So for me, as an example, I get anxious about choking on my food, and and I know what my trigger is as well. So I've choked on a crisp over the new year, and nothing drastic or anything like that, but then I got in my head that it was still there, and for 2 weeks now I've really struggled to eat, even though I'll talk to you about it quite openly and maybe laugh about it with people. I almost laugh at myself because I think it's ridiculous, but actually it is quite dangerous, and I've not eaten too much for the last 2 weeks, so I know how dangerous it can be. So it's really important to break out of this cycle. I had this fear of choking over food, so I just didn't look forward to food. I dreaded every meal time. I'm saying it past tense, but I'm still trying to get through it now. And every meal time I would just rather have some soup or something that I could drink almost, opposed to something that could potentially get stuck in my throat. And I haven't eaten crisps since. I know that's an avoidance behaviour. So the next step in the anxiety cycle is you get anxious about something. The next step is you start to avoid whatever's making you feel uncomfortable. The feeling of anxiety is so uncomfortable that you try and counteract that, not putting yourself in that situation. Now that could be physically or emotionally. For me, I've avoided crisps, I've avoided certain foods, I've avoided meals, I've avoided eating altogether, and I know this isn't good for me. I know I need to break the cycle. Unless, like I said, it's just one example. Now you may have something that you could think of in your life right now. What are you avoiding? Why are you avoiding it? First of all, why do you do that? Why do we do this behaviour? Now, it's natural for us to avoid things that cause us discomfort, and in many ways it's a good thing. So if you avoid something because it's too hot, then if your tea's too hot, you're going to avoid drinking it for a bit, or you avoid certain things that make you feel afraid. So scary animals, for example, you might avoid walking into a snake pit, and those type of things are okay because they're part of the body's natural defense, a way of coping in that situation. You try and avoid that situation. Don't put yourself down too much, because your body is just reacting how it is meant to be reacting, but sometimes it's just unnecessary, and you feel it's necessary because your head is saying one thing, but think about it, you know that it isn't necessary. So it caused me short-term relief. So by avoiding these things, the next step of the cycle is that it causes you short-term relief, and so it feeds back into your brain that, oh, I don't feel uncomfortable anymore, I feel much more comfortable not doing these things, so let's not do it again. And so for me, I avoided these foods. I felt better for it because I didn't feel anxious about eating. I didn't feel that obstruction in my throat that after I would eat a meal I would feel like it's still there, and I'd go still coughing, thinking it's there, having water, having drinks to try and make sure it's gone down properly. But actually, by avoiding these things, I didn't have all of that ordeal, so I felt relieved. Unfortunately, this is just short term, and the long term of it is that it will just feed more and more into your own anxiety, and your anxiety will just grow and grow, and then you're restricting yourself. So if I continued along this path, I would potentially lose a lot of weight and become very ill because I'm not eating enough, and I know that's not good for me. And in your case, you might be restricting your life or your lifestyle. You might not be going out, you might be avoiding social interactions or social situations because you made a plan and you didn't, and now you're backtracking on it because you feel like you don't want to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. So you don't see your friends, or you don't go to a work party, for example. But in the long term of it, it's all just feed back onto your own anxieties, because then you'll think, I didn't build those friendships, I didn't build those relationships with those people, or well, it's been so long now I've not been outside or been to the shops that I don't know how to be anymore. And so it becomes a completely different way of life, and you're restricting yourself, so then it will feed back in a negative loop because you'll get more and more anxious, and those things become less and less familiar. So the way you need to break that cycle is by recognizing what you're anxious about. That is the first step, is what is triggering you. Recognizing those symptoms. In the short term, you can use coping mechanisms to help calm yourself down and think, okay, well, rather than avoiding this situation, what can I do that's manageable? How do I face these fears, these things that are making me feel uncomfortable, but in a more manageable way? For me, this has been, I will not eat solely soup, because soup it's not nutritious, and it's not gonna be my long-term solution. So rather than just have a liquid diet, for me, I will eat solid foods, and I might not eat as much as what I used to, but I will eat it, and if I have to chew it more than what I would usually have done, then that's my way of kind of coping at the moment. Some kind of stringy foods I'm still avoiding at the moment, so all of your like rocket and your lettuce, those kinds of things that I think I am avoiding still, and I know that. But in my first few steps of trying to recover, I don't need to go full ham. I don't need to stuff my face with every food that makes me feel uncomfortable. That is overwhelming to me. So what I'll do is I'll have small portions and of healthy food and just chew them up. However, I still do feel anxious, and I still do get that lump in my throat and still feel like there's food in my throat, but I'll make sure I've got some water and some tea to flush whatever I think is there, which I know probably isn't there. By doing these things, I'm not completely avoiding what's scaring me. I'm just facing my fear in a manageable way, and a bit by bit I'll just get back to how I was coping before. I've eaten food for almost 26 years. I know that I know how to eat food without choking, so it will just come back naturally to me. But in the meantime, whilst I'm feeling this way, which is completely okay to feel how I'm feeling, I'm gonna break it down into logical, manageable steps, and this is what you should do with what you're avoiding. So whether that's a social thing, whether it's your health, anything that you're avoiding, you need to recognize that you're doing it, and then think, well, how can I build myself up to face my fear? Now, please don't face your fear, on your own. You can ask your friends to help you. You can ask your therapist to help you. What I'm talking about is covered in exposure therapy, where your therapist would gradually expose you to your fear in this same way. So by facing your fear, your anxiety will decrease, because you'll face it and you'll think, well, I didn't die, the worst thing didn't happen to me. What I was afraid of was the feeling of anxiety, which I already know my feelings now, and the more exposure you get to it, the less anxiety you'll feel. And it isn't just one thing you have to do this for. For me, I've got a fear of choking, I've also got a fear of having vertigo again, and so I don't sleep on my right side, and I've not slept on my right side for about 7 months now, and I know that's avoidance, so I know I need to break free of this cycle. So my first step was by doing my yoga, and yoga you're leaning up to one side and the other, and I could have gone into yoga thinking, well, I'll do everything but this or but that, because that makes me feel uncomfortable and I might feel like I'm going dizzy or off balance. But actually I threw myself into yoga and I've done everything, and now I feel a little bit better about my own body balance and turning certain ways, and nothing happened. So I know that actually it's just my anxiety making me feel off balance in that respect, and gradually I'm just breaking free of that cycle. That cycle for me is surrounded by vertigo. My other cycle is surrounds choking. You have to laugh. The funny thing about anxiety is next month I know that it's probably going to be something else, and I recognise the cycle. We have to be logical about these situations and learn how to break free, and the only way you can break free of these cycles is through your own recognition and accountability for what you're doing. So I hope this helps. If it has helped, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like. Let me know if you are trying to break free of this cycle, and let me know how you get on. We're in this together, guys.